Welcome to the Ruck. I'm Rico, and today we're speaking to a man who represents over 400 professional rugby players and a loud voice in world rugby circles, Aayden Clark. But first, rugby news. Michael Hooper has quit Australia for Japan. Yep, for the first 6 months of 2021, he signed with Japanese team Toyota Verblitz. Oh, what a feeling. Or as the Japanese would say, Michael-san, arigato gozaimashita. The 99 Test Wallaby will miss most of the 2021 Super Rugby campaign, but maybe come back to play for the Waratahs in late 2021. Maybe the reason for quitting is the fact that Rugby Australia staff are trying to calm the fears over the prospect of months on the road, which could result in some footballers opting to sit out the Rugby Championship. The Test calendar is still up in the air as Rugby Australia and New Zealand Rugby work non-stop to get matches locked in here and across the ditch in New Zealand with a potential 5-game matchup. Hey, maybe they could call it the COVID Cup. The first game is in New Zealand on November 7 and the last on December 12. What'll be the problem with that? Well, the later date could prove problematic for players as they may still be in quarantine on Christmas Day when they return to Australia. Why are they quarantining? It doesn't make sense. They're in their own bubble. They've got doctors and medical staff that travel with them, and there's no crowds at games. Now let's chat to the voice for Pacific Island players, former teammate at Kintetsu Liners in Japan, Hawke's Bay legend and CEO of Pacific Rugby players, my bro, Aayden Clark. G'day bro, how are you?
How are you, man? Good?
Yeah, no, good thanks bro. Hey, awesome to catch up with you. We really appreciate your time, giving up your time. I know you're a busy man, and condolences too, bro, for your koro. So, but yeah, thanks for joining us. So, bro, I'm just gonna touch on a few things, but first, you're obviously from a small place called Wairoa, which is down the road from my hometown Gisborne. I know you're a graduate of the Wairoa Tigers rugby league team, and I think you were in the academy at the age of 3 or 4 years old. And you played quite a lot of rugby for Hawke's Bay. Is it 46 games?
Yep.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, bro, about your rugby career, just briefly, how you went from Wairoa to Hawke's Bay, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah, just I guess the short story, I guess, yeah, like you said, both pretty small town, Wairoa, not known for much more than gangs and freezing works. Yeah. But I wouldn't have changed my upbringing at all. Fortunate enough to get out of there and move to the Big Smoke in Napier and Hawke's Bay, and I guess start to carve out a little bit of a career in rugby, giving up the other sports so I could focus on those. Pretty passionate, pretty proud of my sort of Hawke's Bay Magpies days, and then sort of progressed on into obviously playing over in Japan and Osaka with you, Snakes, at Kintetsu Liners. But yeah, I guess I didn't come from anything flash, no real academies. No high performance units, nothing like that.
Just the Wairoa Tigers.
Just Wairoa Tigers and a bit of work ethic running up some of the hills in the background of our town, and probably learnt the hard way. So it's not quite that way these days. Most of the young fellas get wrapped in cotton wool pretty early on, as you know. But yeah, that's what about me. And
cool.
Yeah, and I sort of progressed through my rugby career. Loving what I do, but also always trying to work on something else outside of rugby, and it's a privilege to be back working in it now.
Yeah, awesome, bro. And going back to our days together, obviously, old teammates about 8 or 9 years ago at the Kintetsu Liners in Japan. What a great experience, for us and being a part of that culture and system over there. I know, you were a bit of a regular at the Nomi Hodai, often, sort of every weekend, which for people at home, it's 2 hours of drinking, I believe. But that's a very common thing in Japan, but different experiences. And it's certainly been a long time since we, were on the rugby field together. But really good memories there.
Bro, I was thinking the other day, probably missed those people who have lived in Japan. You spend a lot of time on your bike, on your Japanese bike, and just riding along those roads, having a big cordial, bro, about life and philosophy and rugby and all those sorts of things. They were good times.
Yeah, and 100%. And bro, if we fast forward, I guess to today, you're in a pretty important role now as CEO, of the Pacific Rugby players. You've got around 400 I guess professional players that you sort of have to manage that are spread out across the globe. Just tell us a little bit about that role and I guess the importance of your role with with them.
Yeah. Well, firstly, it's a huge privilege for me to be able to lead Pacific Rugby players in their organisation, because I often tell people I sort of stand on the shoulders of giants. The guys before me who recognised that there was a need for player representation across the Pacific, like there was elsewhere in the world. They had huge wisdom and really to set things in place, and the things that we're doing today across the world with our staff and the likes of London and Paris and Fiji and in the islands is a tribute to the work that they did early on. For me, 80% of what we do is about personal development and focusing on life after rugby for players. So for Pacific Islanders, that's really focusing on leveraging our time as professional athletes in rugby, financial literacy, making smart investments, and working on careers outside of that.
Awesome.
That's 80% of what we do. 20%, the rest is probably me and behind the scenes, in the dark rooms, the strategic side of what's good for Pacific Island rugby players, working alongside the 3 unions and the CEOs in World Rugby, and really trying to push forward with the many opportunities that come across that hopefully will benefit not only the Pacific Island players now and the professionals now, but the next ones and the generations to come.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome, bro. And I think I think they're very lucky to have you as well. In terms of your contribution and obviously your entrepreneurial mindset. It's great that you're involved.
I was a little bit apprehensive being Māori and then leading an organisation that represents Fiji, Tonga and Samoa, and not being a Pacific Islander of sense, but obviously having a pretty close cultural understanding, as you'll know, bro, with our Māori culture. But I've learnt over the years that it's actually been a huge asset. To be across it, to be unbiased, and to not be either has worked really well. If you can imagine me going to sit down and negotiate Fiji 7 contracts with John O'Connor, the CEO there, I think if I was Tongan or if I was Samoan, he might hold his cards pretty close to his chest. And likewise, if I was Tongan going into the Samoan Rugby Union. So built great relationships with the leaders of those organisations that I think has benefited, hopefully, the Pacific Island players that are running around all over the world.
And speaking of contracts, bro, for the Pacific Island players, I guess in the past, I think that it's sort of been well known that they've been going to big clubs for very cheap. Are they starting to get more, I guess, value in terms of their contract, in terms of what they're worth? Is that sort of coming up to speed nowadays?
I think they are. I think, in a lot of the major competitions around the world, Pacific Islanders make up the bulk of the players. In New Zealand and Australia, it's over 50% of Super Rugby players are Pacific Islanders these days. I think just the journey to get there is sometimes a little bit different for them to get recognised, where the player agents and some of the clubs seem to, what I'd say, prey sometimes, is really about providing opportunity for young Pacific Islanders to benefit their families, and they leverage off that by possibly getting them a little bit cheaper than you would the same type of talent elsewhere in the world, because it's more than rugby for our players. It's about getting overseas. It's about creating income that they can send home, and life experiences for them and their families. So I can see how it does happen sometimes, and that's our role as a players association. Often the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and helping players get out of sticky situations and really poor contracts and clubs that aren't looking after their welfare. But in general, I think the boys are starting to earn some really good coin, and also for our women who are being recognised as well. In Fiji, we've got contracted players there for 7s and 15s now, and it's been hard work, but we're there, and it's really great steps forward.
Yeah, of course, women's rugby. What a Yeah, that's certainly accelerated in the last few years. And speaking of opportunities and lifestyle experiences, how's this Kanaloa Hawaiian team that popped up a couple of months ago? Speaking of having only Māori and Pacific Island players, and potentially they have a license for the MLR in the USA. And they're even speaking of a potential team for Super Rugby. I guess the first thing is that realistic in terms of Super Rugby? And if so, is that going to bring players back, from Europe to be closer to home?
Yeah, I think the whole Super Rugby conversation is about options for Pacific Island players, that they can stay closer to home. At the moment, there isn't an option. If you want to earn some good coin, you have to go to Europe and Japan. There's no pathway through Super Rugby. So the key thing there is standing up a franchise team, and there's never been a better time than now. At the moment, it's really busy in that space for us, and we're across. Before I get to Kanaloa, there's another 5 organisations who are putting their hands up and doing some great work to put their to get that license. So we're working really important that as a players association we're unbiased and transparent, and we provide information to all of them that helps them put the best foot forward that they can. And we've been doing that. Kanaloa is one of them. Tracy Artinga, working really closely with her. And it's been really good. They're hugely aspirational. Not firstly around MLR, which is realistic, and that's the most important thing for us. I remember I said to Tracy when we first made contact, I'm not too fussed about all the detail, but we just want to make sure it's realistic, because we don't want players to forego other opportunities, chasing the dream to live and play in Hawaii, and it doesn't come out. So they're doing some good work in behind the scenes on that, and then now also putting their hands up for Super Rugby. So nice. And like I said, they're one of many. So I think it's good from us. The more rugby contracts and professional opportunities for players from the Pacific, the better. So our role is just to help ensure that player welfare and all the considerations are at the forefront of Kanaloa and all those organisations as they build their rugby teams.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if they are to have that set up in Hawaii, bro, I mean, I'd certainly love to spend some time there with you over some nomi hodai. That would be awesome.
Who wouldn't? Like, it's a genuine attraction, right? And I often say that in the consideration, let's say there's a Super Rugby team based in Auckland. Some of the boys and their families, they love to go to Paris and they love to go to Osaka and live and learn a new culture. And that's part of the package, as you and I know, as we make those career decisions. So Hawaii, beach, good weather. Sounds right to me.
No, absolutely. So that's exciting. And lastly, bro, there's it's just come out that Michael Hooper's quitting Australian rugby to take up a contract in Japan. So, I mean, what do you think about that? I noticed that they spoke about in the media recently there's concern for the Australian players being away from home for a long time. They're talking about the Rugby Championship and having to quarantine, and maybe that's something that Michael Hooper's considered, and he's off to Japan.
Yeah, it's such an uncertain landscape in rugby at the moment. We once were able to plan and know what we wanted to do, career, and players who were smart with their agents were planning their careers out in 2 and 3 year stages. At the moment, we just don't know. And if you've got an expiry date on your rugby career, which I guess Michael Hooper quite possibly has, do you want to be stuck at home and not be able to travel and experience life for the next 2 or 3 years, which could happen? Quite possibly not. So there's across the world, and I know a lot of our players that we support, and everybody having some pretty interesting conversations over the dinner table with their wives and partners about what they do next steps. And like I said with our guys, I couldn't imagine it's any different to Michael Hooper's. It's about, it's more than just money. It's more than chasing the next contract and getting the lucrative dollar. It's about providing experiences for you and your family. So why not? It's just so tricky. And I know Australia rugby is not in the strongest spot. Sorry, I've got a few guests behind me here, and I'm in the way.
Are you okay?
A few sheep?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
Are you part of...
Yeah, I'm just over there. Sorry, I'm just doing a little interview live on thing. Sorry about that. Yep.
Give us a wave.
Yeah. That's fine. So, bro, I can imagine that it's some tough decision making to happen for some star players across the world. But now's the time they need to do them.
That's right, Brian. Like you're saying, a professional rugby player, we have an end date, and you've got to maximise, the opportunity. And with these uncertain times, players are certainly, looking at things a bit differently with what's going on. But hey, bro, really appreciate your time. Thanks for having us. And good to chat to you, bro. And we'll catch up soon. But all the best with your koro over the next few days.
Namahi, bro. Thanks for that. And I appreciate the chat anytime. And I look forward to hopefully these borders opening and getting back and catching up on the Gold Coast, eh?
Absolutely. Choice, bro. Thanks a lot. Good on you, legend. Nice farm. And before we go, good luck to Lockie Bloxon in the 11 Sports Machine at Queensland Raceway this weekend and racing in the upcoming street circuit before the V8 Supercars in Townsville. Do us proud, Lockie. That's our show. Comment, like and subscribe below for updates. Don't forget to hit the little alerts button. For all your rugby and sports action, go to 11sports.net and network11.tv. See you next week.